If you've seen any of my videos, then you probably like exploring and understanding new ideas, and I bet you'd also like to have a discussion about those ideas, and that's exactly why I'm doing this. Recently I got a response, a lengthy and very well put response on a video that I did about communism and Marxism, specifically as it's put and laid out in the Communist Manifesto. He brought up so many good points that I think frankly it just warranted its own video, so here we are. I'm going to read the whole thing in its entirety. This intro, if you want to skip it, fine. It's the first minute or so here, but afterwards he has 3 points and I'll get to them and give my response. Hey, cool channel. I like it. Oh, thanks. Let me, edit not, briefly tell you where I'm coming from. I think the USSR, PRC, and their allies were and continue to be the good guys in either relative or absolute terms, take your pick, since the 1930s at the latest. I'm not truly a Marxist-Leninist, since ML is a program of action, revolution, and governance, and while I largely agree with the most up-to-date party line, i.e. that of the present-day Communist Party of China, on these issues, I am sadly just another millennial Gen Z boundary-dwelling raised by the internet autodidact with obscure and contrarian historical and political views, same, so I don't believe I qualify. I live in the US, and I identify with what passes for the left, or radical left here, about to the extent I imagine an imperial Japanese soldier would identify with a typical weeaboo. There's nothing for me here, so my praxis consists of occasionally chiming in when people discuss history or geopolitics. That being said, I've been following with great interest the online right, new right, alt-right, and or neo-reaction for well over a decade now. Unlike the first world left, the new right is as of yet largely uncompromised. And by uncompromised, I literally mean infiltrated by agents of the ruling class via the state, COINTELPRO style, enabling it to wield a narrative-shattering, and by narrative I mean the narrative, with a capital N, power that communists and socialists in the US haven't possessed since the end of World War II. Given that our left for the last 70 years has been laser focused on reinforcing the narrative, retconning it and purplifying its prose wherever possible, and as quickly as possible, I can't help but feel swept up in the excitement that the new right has generated, anti-communism be damned. I've gone on for too long, so here are my objections, which, as I hope I've established, are entirely in good faith, and I believe you have absolutely established that they are in good faith. So I think here he pretty accurately identifies me as of the right, you might say of the far right or even radical right, but I'm right, I'm of the right rather, he's of the left, so we're having this discussion, and this is exactly what I want. This is exactly the kind of debate and discussion that I was hoping for. So, great, and thank you so very much, I really appreciate it. Real quickly though, before I hop into his points, I took my own notes and I wrote them down, so if you see me looking off, that's just me reading my own notes. My intent was to try to give as well put of a response to his response that he gave me, so I'm trying. His first point is that the Communist Manifesto is a propaganda pamphlet aimed at factory workers. It was formulated explicitly to provoke the European industrial working class to organize and revolt. It's not immediately obvious that this is the case, as it's been presented as a central pillar of Marxism, and it's hard for a modern to understand that factory workers could be literate. But if you rethink its claims and arguments with its intended goal in mind, it makes a lot more sense. It's not a serious work of history or philosophy, nor is it trying to be. I understand your point that it was a pamphlet for workers, and it's a very fair point on the literacy. Like, a lot of people, basically everybody being able to read in the world, at least in the world that we recognize on at first thought, that is truly a new convention. It's a modern convention. That is not the way that the world has been for a large part of its history. So again, fair point. It's also perfectly fair that this was a pamphlet. The Communist Manifesto, if you see in the video, it is a very, very small work. It is a pamphlet, and it's not nearly as long, detailed, or just all-encompassing as Marx's other works like Capital and other things from Friedrich Engels and stuff too. There's a recommended reading list in the back of the copy, of my copy rather, of the Communist Manifesto for follow-on readings. So you're right, it wasn't meant to be the one document that you need to read to understand all of communism. Fine and fair. I still think it encapsulates many of the base points, and as you note, it was meant to stir revolution. So it captures enough of the ideology for an intended purpose that I think that alone makes it worthwhile to understand as a standalone document. That yes, while it was aimed at factory workers that probably couldn't read it. If they could get if Marx could have gotten one person to read it to the people, that was the point of it. I think yes, it wasn't that everybody would have the time or frankly even ability to read it, but that information was accessible and digestible enough to actively reach the masses, to, as you put it yourself, stir revolution within the masses, to make people angry enough for reasons that Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels put out, enough that they would actively try to take over industries, take over property, and to, yes, kill people, have a violent revolution for the sake of the goals and aims of Karl Marx and communism. And I think this point gets not exacerbated, but it's made even more prominent when you consider the fact that we're still talking about it today and that we're still actively killing each other over the same idea today. It was influential then. It still remains to be influential today. And for that purpose, for even that reason alone, I think that it's worthwhile understanding the root documents and root ideas of communism. And yes, I also understand that it didn't start truly with Karl Marx. It came from the French Commune and presumably other ideas, other places and events before then too. So, but this was the first that I found, and as I've come to understand it, the first documented collection of communism, the first documented definition of this is what it is. So I think it's worthwhile understanding and treating it as such. And I do think that it is a serious work of history and philosophy. And just see my prior point. I disagree. I see your point, and you bring up some fair points with regard to literacy and all that, but I still disagree. See the past few minutes for why. Your second point. Yes, some of the prescriptions in the manifesto are stupid, and upon being tested in the 1920s USSR were found not to work. I don't have any examples, but I'm confident that if you read early liberal philosophers, the ideologues of capitalism in its primordial stage, you'll find equally dumb ideas that haven't survived or were never implemented because they didn't and or can't work. You can't fault Isaac Newton for lacking an understanding of general relativity. Again, perfectly fair points, perfectly good faith. I'm curious which prescriptions you would say were tested and abandoned in the USSR. As I know, like I just read there, you said you don't have examples, and frankly, I don't have examples either. I'd still be very curious, though, to see which ones were tested and then abandoned, or just never tried in the first place. And again, also fair that not all ideas survive the test of time if they're even tested. You're right, I don't fault Isaac Newton for not having an understanding of general relativity if the idea wasn't discovered or expounded upon. Like, I can't fault people for things that they genuinely don't know. But this is the writings of Karl Marx, and I will fault him for what I find in his own writings. That's so fair points, I guess, just a rebuttal there. Before I continue, I'm curious who would say the early liberal philosophers and the capitalist ideologues were. I'm genuinely curious because it's another area that I'm seeking to explore to truly understand, but I digress. Now to the point though, given how communists, socialists, or Soviets employed violent controls over businesses, churches, or daily private life, how the ideas of abolishing all private property, all in service of the state, control over production, education, living place, and living space, I'm failing to see how any idea in the manifesto wasn't employed in that same regard. Everything all the way down even to the abolition of the family. You'll see today, whether they understand it or not, a lot of the most ardent socialists and Marxists, a lot of the people that would identify very closely with communism and condemn capitalism or the West or America or insert non-communist thing here, you'll see that they're very almost exclusively. I have yet to find a single one, I think, that would actually oppose things like abortion and birth control. What is the abolition of the family if not the active and willful destruction of your progeny? So everything from to each according to their own, whatever that means from the state, from state control of industry to the abolition of the family, I'm failing to see how any of the ideas in the Communist Manifesto have not been employed by the people who would say that they are themselves communists, whether they've read the original document or not. I'd say more, but it's actually, I think, better to put it into your third point, which you say is continuing from point number 2. If you do in fact want to address, refute, understand, or in any way discuss communism on a factual level, you should direct your research at the People's Republic of China. I would contend that an intellectually honest inquiry into the merits or lack thereof of socialism should be directed at its most relevant incarnation, the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful currently existing Marxist-Leninist state. I mean, discussing ideas is cool for sure, and there's certainly no issue with that being your primary focus. Still, perhaps selfishly, I'd very much like to see an honest examination of China from the right. And I think it could be as eye-opening for you as it was for me from my perspective on the fringes of the dismal and dysfunctional American left. Yet another fair, good faith point, and I think you put it well, the current state of China as the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful currently existing Marxist-Leninist state, though surely not the only one. That inspection, that kind of investigation of China in its contemporary sense, but also in the sense of the 20th century, that's certainly on my list, and not only for contemporary importance, but also that I believe it's one of the most misunderstood countries and world powers today. And the scale to which, with the scale rather, to which they are a world power, I think it carries the largest consequences. And that's for the purpose of, that's for how I identify China with empire. You have, in my view, you have maintenance of a country and the expansion of empire. Unless you're going to retract and resign yourself to internal depletion, or frankly, just to, I guess, to put it in a single word, death of your country, the best you can do is work, and yes, it will require work, for maintenance of the current status quo, maintenance of your borders, maintenance of your economy, maintenance of your influence, maintenance of your culture, to just keep things as they are. It's still going to require positive effort to keep things as, to keep what you have already. If you're not going to resign yourself to death, if you're not going to work on maintenance of your country, then you are working on expanding an empire. It is imperial goals and aims that you have, in my mind, at least from my perspective. If you're going to expand your borders, expand your influence, exert power, if you're going to do these things, then it is an empirical perspective. It's an empirical will that you have. And yes, I'm talking about China as much as I'm talking about Russia and Iran, and yes, America too. The way that we put ourselves out there in the world, it is, from my perspective, empirical in nature. And that's kind of why, at least in a nutshell, why misunderstanding China carries the largest consequences, whether or not they're more politically or ideologically aligned with us. I think that we are practically entirely morally opposed, us and the US and China. But even if we were very much in line, let's say even completely aligned with the exception of we're Americans and they're Chinese, eventually those empirical wills are going to clash. They could be so on the same page in every regard with the exception of national identity. And eventually that's going to cause a clash. So yes, the ideologies and the whole governmental structures and imposition of wills and all that, those are all things that need to be recognized and understood, whether they're in soft forms like exporting people and money, or hard power as in like military force. Recognizing that, but also understanding it too, understanding the history of it, how it appears today, and its implications for what it might mean tomorrow. Very important to understand, certainly on my list, but I want to go through the bases of these ideas too, the bases of these ideologies. You said that they were the good guys back in your introduction, and I humbly and politely disagree completely. I don't like how everything is done in the West today. I don't like everything that America does, and I know certainly that in the past too, we have done bad things. We've done wrong too. We're people. Man's not perfect, inherently flawed. I'm glad that the West won the Cold War. I'm glad that we've made it to the point that we are today, and I'm hoping that we don't lose this next Cold War that I kind of believe that we're sitting in right now. Everything that I said about the Communist Manifesto, everything that I would say about Leninism, because I have read some of his works and I have videos planned on those too. All of that and more, I believe, are perfectly embodied in China, and I think it is awful. It's abysmal from the way that they controlled, from the Cultural Revolution to the 100 Flowers campaign to the Industrial Revolution, basically everything that Mao Zedong did, terrible. The way that he simplified the Chinese language, the way, in my view, what I've learned of Chinese in that regard, he stripped meaning and significance. He stripped potency from the very language that people have, and just so many terrible things that came out of the 20th century, not to mention the tens of millions of dead Chinese in that same time period. But even today, to how they have a very similar control on speech, to how they have these censorship bureaus, to how they have their mobile death vans for executions of whoever they deem to be a criminal. They'll come to you, come to your front door, get in the van, kill you, and then harvest your organs. There's so much stuff that I think is awful about China as a country, as a government, and certainly worth all of the investigation. Their soft export of influence and money, as I mentioned, to their exertions of hard power through military force, military positioning, or their deals like their Belt and Road Initiative, how they're working in Africa and South America too. People need to understand these things. They need to recognize them and understand them, why they're doing it, why they have done it before, why they're doing it now, and what that could mean for us tomorrow. These need to be understood. All of the contemporary importance that it could have for us, the significance of what it is for today and for tomorrow. These ideas didn't start with China. It didn't start with Xi Jinping. It didn't start with Mao Zedong. These ideas started somewhere else. And that somewhere is frankly my chief concern. Because there are a lot of people talking about China. There are a lot of people talking about Russia. There are a lot of people talking about everything in the world today. I don't think that there are enough people having enough discussions about where these things come from, where these ideas have come from, these people have come from. This lack of understanding of the bases of these ideas, I think it leaves us open to something that might be even more dangerous, and that's having a fundamental misunderstanding of these ideas in the first place. I read a book recently from Orrin McIntyre. It's called The Total State. And he puts on there that the liberal democracies of the West have worked towards removing people from the responsibility not only of themselves, but their responsibility of conflict, from understanding what friends and enemies are. And one of the ways that I think this is accomplished is, not to get too far off the Communist Manifesto and to your point, but this is to your point. One of the ways that I think that they did that was in a variety of ways. They have set things up such that we don't understand what communism actually is, what fascism actually is, what liberalism actually is, where these ideas come from, who the originators were of these schools of thought. We can't know who Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who Adam Smith and John Locke were, without doing a lot of research on our own, not only to find the resources ourselves, not only to find the primary and secondary sources ourselves, but to discern independently which ones are worthwhile. And that is a gross disservice that has been happening over generations to us in the West, to us in America, that we don't know what we don't know. And these things that we don't know are going to have led, rather, to mass atrocities being committed today that we remain ignorant of. And because we don't know what we don't know, and so many people don't know where to look for what they don't know where to find this information, and a lot of them don't even think of the question of why or where. They don't even start this journey. They don't start this exploration. It's going to lead to similar mass atrocities in the future, and it's largely because of ignorance. Orchestrated or not, it's largely because of ignorance. So, all of that to the point, you bring up you make a very good request in wanting the exploration of the modern Chinese Communist Party and how things are done there today. Again, certainly on my list. I really, really want to understand where these ideas come from, because so many people, and myself included, more so prior than today, but still certainly today, thought that we knew these ideas, thought that we knew where they came from and what they actually meant. But the more that I looked and the more that I continued to look, the more that I realized, wow, I didn't know a whole lot. So I'm going to continue to look at these source documents. But like I said, China's on my list. I didn't actually mean for this video to be this long, but like I said, he brought up a lot of really good points. He or she brought up a lot of really good points that I think was just worth having its own video. I really hope that I addressed the points in a manner of a similar quality than you gave me. I love this discussion. I love this response. Again, thank you so much for this. And thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far. Do the algorithm stuff, because that does help. But also, I have a link to books that I write. I am an author too, nonfiction, but also I'm working on my first fiction book. If you have any other ideas or countries or topics or whatever that you think that I should be turning my attention towards, please let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. Do that same stuff too. But again, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.